Before we record today's episode of Close of Play, we send our condolences to all of those affected by the terrible and tragic events at Bondi Beach yesterday. Senseless acts like these are difficult to understand and put sport into perspective.
If you get 400 in the first innings of a test match, you have something like an 85% chance of going on to win. So I then worked backwards and thought, okay, I've just arrived in this team. How can I best help us get 400? And I knew that if I could not allow the Indian bowlers or the New Zealand bowlers, whoever it was, to get me out early on, then surely the percentage chance of us getting 400 and batting that day would go up.
There's a big difference between practice and preparation.
I think it was a disappointing comment from Baz McCullum in a number of ways. It almost played us the fool in a way. And I would agree with him. I think you have over practiced there, but the work should have been done a long time ago. And I think we've been fed the narrative that the work has been done, that we've been building for this Ashes for 3 years, 2, 3, 4 years. And clearly the work hasn't been done. Preparation is, has an intelligence behind it and has an idea of how we're going to prepare for certain conditions. And a couple of net sessions or a club game at Lilac Hill isn't that.
As the Ashes moves to the pivotal third test, Geraint Jones and me, Sanjay Murthy, are joined by former England batter Nick Compton to assess whether Bazball has finally met its match. We also look at the lost art of batting time and preview the third test starting tomorrow. Nick, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Sanj. Yeah, I'm very good, thanks. Currently in Cape Town, so probably more similar to where the English are in Australia right now. It's hot, it's sunny. Couldn't ask for better weather. I'm just going to rub it into the salt into the wounds there.
We've established, Jones, that you two played against each other, which surprised me a lot given the age gap.
Yeah, it would have been sort of Middlesex and Kent times, and maybe in a bit of Gloucester. But yeah, Sanjay, I did play in some coloured sort of TV stuff, which I know you sort of look back and think you're not sure. But yeah, Compo and I aren't that far apart.
I had the privilege of getting some banter from Jonesy behind the stumps when I think he was playing for quite a strong Kent team back then, weren't you? The likes of Kesey and Fultz and all those guys. They're a very good team, and actually I think that was one of my first class games playing against Jonesy at Lords. I think I remember that. So yeah, he's not that old, is he? I mean, he might wear some old fashioned clothes, but he looks all right.
Here we go. We're straight in. I'm sure I was very complimentary. Behind the stumps, I kept quiet and let everyone else do it.
That's pretty true.
Were you waving your OBE around in Nick's face at that time?
See, Sanjay, that's where you and your stats, mate. You've got it wrong. Is an MBE.
Sorry. Is that not as good or better?
No idea. I think it's better.
No, you'd had too many jars by then anyway. Right, there's some cricket to be discussed. Let's go on with it. So, obviously they've gone off to Noosa, the England side, with a flea in their ear from especially the captain. And then I heard Joe Root on the Sky Sports cricket podcast talking to NASA. And then there was an interview with Harry Brook. And both of those seemed sort of quite calm, if you like, and sort of acceptant of the way that they batted, especially Harry Brook in tests gone by. Do you think actually that Stokes' words have actually hit home and you're going to see a New England approach this next Adelaide test?
Shall I start off?
Yeah, that was it. I did say, Jonesy, what do you think at the beginning?
Did you?
I know it's a long question, but it's
Oh, well, you know what those long questions rambles, mate. Right? Okay. Yeah, I do think they've reflected which is what we wanted them to do, wasn't it? Sort of going away from that Brisbane Test match. Everyone was screaming out, basically, have a look at yourselves and sort it out. And so 4 days I read something as well. They haven't been anywhere near cricket, completely got away from it, but they've obviously done some thinking and processing about how they should do it. And I thought with Brook, even though he has no regrets, the fact he's going to change his approach and look to bat some time. And we've got Compo here who was a great sort of exponent of that to talk a bit about that. But one thing I did hear Brook say that one of his dismissals, he was looking to hit for 6. It was early on. It was like for me, Test match cricket, the only time I try to hit sixes was either sort of, if a spinner and I was in, or it was a declaration. So it's just a completely different way of thinking. So he's obviously going to rein that in, and then you've got the skipper who's given them an absolute rollicking, and so I just hope they don't go too far, and that's the one thing with this side. We just want a balance. We know how talented they are, but we want a balance of when they choose to try and sort of hit 360 and hit them out the ground.
So is Bazball as a concept, something that you can pick and choose as to when to bring out the locker, if you like, and that the majority of time you play proper test cricket, if you like. So Nick, the great exponent of batting time, and actually time and play suggests that you can play aggressive, which if he did that is no different to kind of how test cricket's been played for the last 20 years anyway. Compo?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Just to go off the back of what Jonesy was saying there, I'm not sure I entirely believe what the players say in the media anymore. And I don't mean to be too critical or harsh, but, is it a slap on the wrist in terms of how they come across in the media? I don't personally believe you can change in the middle of a series. We're talking about players here in my, looking at it, are quite young. They're quite inexperienced, and I think they're in the team because they play a certain way. Now, to ask them to try and rein it in or play a different type of cricket for me would be questioning the whole philosophy that Kesey and of course Brendan McCulley have brought to this English team. It might sound good and it might be the right things to say, because I think they certainly didn't say the right things at the end of the last Test match. And I think there's got to be a little bit of smart and some intelligence, particularly to try and get fans back on their side and make sure that they do give themselves the best chance for the next 3 tests. But I think it will be difficult to play a different style of cricket. But you're absolutely right. Ideally, you can't berate them for wanting to play a more entertaining brand of cricket. I think we've all enjoyed aspects of that, the Stokes-McCullum regime, but fundamentally, Jonesy will know as much as anyone, to be consistent, not only just in your own country, but to be consistent worldwide in different conditions, in different situations. It's not a one size fits all. And, you look at the players that have been selected, I'm not sure there's too much variation there if they need to stick in, dig in, get through the new ball, all those kind of attributes that we know make up, a good test batsman, but also a good test team. So I think some of the truisms or the reality of this team is sort of slowly coming out now.
So do you think then that, they've played a certain way, obviously all the way through up to this point, last 3 years, and the side that they've picked, which is basically this, there's one change, so Atkinson out and Josh Tongue in, which has probably come as a surprise to a number of people given what Stokes said. But do you think, and Josie, I think we've discussed this before, that England have backed themselves into a corner and have done over the last few years with their selections. And as Compo says, where do they have to go now? They've got no choices. They've got to play the same 7 players, 8 if you include Jacks.
Yeah, and that's what everyone said about this touring squad, isn't it? That there was just there's no pressure from outside of them. There's been a little bit of stuff recently about the Roux brothers, and but they won't be included in this series because even though they're out there with the Lions, they're going with this 7. Brendan McCullum said the same thing, and so Compo raised a really good point there, that they are very similar in terms of a lot of them. And you'd probably argue Ollie Pope, who at 3 was the one who's under most pressure and was the different player, but they stuck with him, and it could be admirable. The fact that they've gone, listen, we've picked these players, we believe in them, we're going to keep giving them opportunities, because in days gone past, it would have been complete wholesale change, but they don't really have the squad to do that this time, and so they're being given the opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see how they do it, because someone like Brooks, who's so talented, and again, I can see why you've got Compo on. He's very intelligent, and he's bringing some good points to it. But for Brooks to be able to change the way he has played, we've seen Root do it. When Bazball first came in, Root was trying all these shots, that reverse scoop first, but he realised sooner than any of them the way that he needs to play himself, and he's settled into it. And we know that he's got those shots in the locker. We look forward to him playing them, but we won't see them until he's 100 plus, like we did when he got his 100 at the Gabba. So with that side of it, it will be interesting. But these 7 aren't really under any pressure. And if we do lose this third Test match and the series, then it'll be what they do. Do they fly anyone in? Do they, and depend on performances as well? Because you got a couple of guys you'd argue. I saw a funny Christmas meme. I think I might send it to you, Sanj, about Zach Crawley and and Keezy for Christmas. And so there's those sort of elements around the squad. There's a couple of players who were all from the outside looking and saying they're under pressure, but internally McCullum saying no, they're not. We're sticking with them.
But again, they got no choice because, as you said, they picked the players to do a job, as Compo said. There's a massive gap between the Lions and the first team, if you like, in terms of experience and ability. So they've got to play the same side. Now, Nick, I guess the question then is it just a case that the talent hasn't adapted itself to Australian conditions?
I think it's interesting. Is it admirable that they're keeping the same side? I'm going to be slightly harsher and cynical and say no, because they haven't got any other options, as Jonesy has alluded to. I'd also say, the facts that we're mentioning the Roux brothers, I mean, they shouldn't even be thought of. Now, the reason I say that is this word, a player's ceiling, seems to have become in vogue. It's all about a player's ceiling. Now, if you went down that route, there are a lot of good players that would never have even got close to playing for England. So yes, the Roux brothers are very exciting, potentially have, big careers ahead of them, but they've played 1 or 2 seasons of first class cricket. I mean, they have no options. The only option is to bring Jacob Bethel in, who has 1 professional 100 in his entire career. And that was only this year in the white ball format. So again, he's been picked on the so-called ceiling, and yes, he's talented, and you can see a player in the nets and all the rest of it, and that's exciting for England going forward. But we're picking kids, and I hate to be really harsh, but where are the hard-nosed pros? Where are the Geraint Joneses that are ready and prime for Test cricket, that have applied their trade for years, who are good professionals who deserve their opportunity? Now, I'm not saying you choose 11 Geraint Joneses. I'm not saying you choose 11.
Can you imagine?
But there's got to be a mixture. And I think that's where it almost takes the piss a little bit, in terms of, you sort of see it as a fun experiment that's being run, and we'd all love to be head coach of a fun experiment, being paid the amount of money that they are. And that might be harsh, but in essence, it's pretty true. The ups and downs and what we're seeing now are relative to where the players are. I don't think they're underperforming. I think they haven't played a lot of cricket in Australia. Jonesy knows the ball bounces differently, the ball behaves differently. There's a skill to batting, whether it be in England, and not, again, to be too harsh, but a lot of the games that England have excited us and dazzled us with their run, scoring ability, has been chasing on pretty placid, flat English wickets, Trent Bridge, the Oval, etc., which is known territory. Australia isn't known territory. And we start getting into these terms of prepared too hard. No, you practice too hard. You definitely didn't prepare too hard. There's 2 different things between practice and preparation. And I think that's what's been disappointing, is the slight arrogance that I feel every time Stokes comes on. There's like a defensive or sort of defensiveness and sort of slight tinge of arrogance, which you sort of think is unnecessary in a way, because, the likes of Aggers and journalists out there are only calling what they see, or we're calling what we see. So I don't quite know where they're going to go. I think you sort of made your bed, you sleep in it. I think you've got to back your way now. And also the other point about Brook. I mean, ideally Brook's coming in at 140 for 2 or 3. Not coming in at sort of 30 for 3. It's a big difference. And for a player like that, and probably Kevin Peterson would be the same. You want KP coming in at 120 for 3, 180 for 3, and then you've got a very different player in your hands, with a destructive capability. I mean, getting Brook in at the times that he's been coming in, is you're probably not going to see the best of him. Has he got the ability to really adapt? He probably has the ability. Has he done it for long periods of time? Probably not. I think Joe Root's a slightly different conversation, because he sort of comes from a slightly previous era. He's a technician. He's a guy who's sort of brought up playing that form of the game. So he can go back to that. If there's 2 maidens bowled at Joe Root, he's not going to panic. Whereas I think with the other guys, the default mechanism is, shit, I'm not sure I've got the defence here to withstand Boyland, who's bowling on third and fourth stump, nipping it both ways. I'm going to have to do something here, and that's kind of the stick or bust sort of situation that I think these players kind of go to, and I think that's where they're coming short.
Jonesy, you've always said that Kesey picks talent first, and I don't think there's any doubt that he's picked talent. Why are they, I'm going to use the word incapable for want of a better phrase, why are they incapable of adapting to Australian conditions? Or why have they been today?
Well, I don't think they're incapable because of that talent. I think they just had, whether it comes back to the time factor they spent there, they warmed up at Lilac Hill, and so they didn't have any preparation time. And a lot of these guys would have been in Australia at some point, but playing on an Australian test pitch is different going playing club cricket. And as Compo said there, back in, back in the old days, we would have had to served our time in county cricket. And that would have meant also a number of winters travelling and spending extended time learning our craft. So I made my debut for Kent in 2003 properly. And, I was 27 at that point. Straussy, I know, was similar. And it used to be a bit of the vogue that you weren't just one season, sort of players who they would then pick. And that's what's different now. I think as a young player, you can come on and you can show some exciting stuff in the 100, in T20, and you don't even have to show it in the long format. Your route in has become through the white ball format. Excite, show some ability in that, and then that will almost draft you into the test side. Whereas my route in was the opposite. I came in test cricket and performances in the championship was how I was judged, and on the back of that, then I was almost the complete opposite. Then I was given the opportunity of one-day cricket, and so I think that also is a bit of the nature of what we're doing in county cricket. Is we're really promoting youngsters. It's happening a lot. Each of the counties now. If I think of my own county, Kent, last year, we finished off promoting and playing some exciting young players. Some of them have gone off to play for, done well at the under-19 level, and they showed glimpses. They're not ready for test cricket, but almost what we're doing is promoting them to test cricket and one-day cricket really early, and then sort of saying, okay, well, you're good enough now, let's play you. So that earned your stripes has gone a little bit out of the game because of the selections that we've been doing. You can do it for a short amount of time, but to perform in the Ashes, perform in test cricket, you need a longer proven track record, because otherwise I think you do see a bit of what we have in this series is that at the highest intense pressure, your thinking and your clarity is skewed, because that's when you want to draw on experience and calmness in the situation.
Compo, just bringing back to a point that you made earlier, that there's a big difference between practice and preparation. Given what Jones just said, can you expound on that and actually sort of tell our listeners what you meant by that?
Yeah, and I think it was a disappointing comment from Baz McCullum in a number of ways. It almost played us the fool in a way. Tried to pretend that they sort of over practiced or over prepared. He used the word because they had sort of 5 net sessions, and I would agree with him. I think you have over practiced there, and I think doing 5 net sessions, grueling net sessions before a test match. I mean, we know that's not going to change anything. Yeah, it might keep you in, and it's up to batsmen's individual sort of style to decide what they want to do leading up to a test match. But the work should have been done a long time ago. And I think we've been fed the narrative that the work has been done, that we've been building for this Ashes for 3 years, 2, 3, 4 years. And clearly the work hasn't been done. And then you go back to when we talk about preparation is different to practice. Preparation is has an intelligence behind it and has an idea of how we're going to prepare for certain conditions. If the ball's going to bounce more, what are we doing that gives ourselves the best opportunity to get used to that, for example? And a couple of net sessions or a club game at Lilac Hill isn't that. I mean, and Jonesy will also know that, yes, the schedules have changed. I mean, you used to go on a test tour, you'd have 3 warm-up games, which would be normally against, an Australian 11, a couple of Shield teams, which was normally quite strong cricket. And that would give you at least 3 goes or 5 or 6 innings in those conditions against their up-and-coming bowlers that were sort of second in line. Those days seem to have gone. And And I guess that's the kind of preparation that's been lacking. And thinking that players can go out there, have a clear head, and just go out and play their natural game in Australia. Well, it's proved not to be like that, and particularly against players who haven't been out there before. So I think there's a bit of naivety in a way that A, they're young players, B, this is the Ashes, and C, you know, we haven't had time to play here. And I almost feel like the players, somebody said it in the media, I think a couple of weeks ago, if they started now, I think England would be better. Would they win? Not sure. But I think they would be better for it. And I mean, it sort of comes back to the same adage of a county season. Mark Ramprakash, a fantastic technician in county cricket, used to say the first 2 months of a county season he gave to the bowlers. And what does that mean? Well, he had enough intelligence to know that the conditions were very much in favour of the bowlers, and he understood that. And if he could spend 100, 200 balls and get 30 or 40 runs, yes, that's not glamorous. Yes, that's not, going to bring the crowds in. But he knew if he could bank those, by the time it came to July, August, September, he had a whole stash of balls behind him to now cash in when it got easier. And I think the same thing in sort of an Ashes series. These first test matches, if you're an opening batter, give yourself some time. Say, you know what? I've never played at Perth before. I've never played on a bouncy wicket like this. I certainly don't play on this every day. Let me just spend half an hour here and just go, okay, these are the conditions. This is what I'm dealing with. And then we know that we've got the players that once they decide to put their foot down, there arguably aren't better players in the world or in the country to say, right, we can take these guys down. But at least give yourself 30, 40, 50 balls. You know what I mean? I mean, if you're not going to change the style of player that they are. But if I was McCullum, I'd say, look, guys, this is the way we play. We're not going to change that now. All I'm asking you to do is just spend 30 or 40 balls out there. Then you can go and play your way. And I think if they do that, I think they'd have a better chance than they have at the moment.
So do you think T20 cricket or white ball cricket has, I'm going to use the word ruined, I think, ruined the mentality and techniques of these younger players, and therefore they can't adapt to Test cricket, where the challenges of bat time, and Nick will come on to that in a minute, have paramount?
I think it's definitely influenced. If I see it from my role at school, that the school players that I see aren't interested in the long form. They'll play in innings and they might get out for less than 10. But if they've hit a boundary, that's all they want to talk about. And it's a bit of that sort of influence is coming through. But I'm there tearing out my hair going, well, hang on, but you've only got 10. Oh, yes, sir, but you see my boundary. 40 balls of getting in. Yeah, it's become almost the hard graft stuff where you're assessed. So when you go out to bat, you're looking at what pace are they bowling, what's the ball doing, what's the pitch doing. And on the back of that, you make decisions. You should have a good idea anyway. And then we talk about nets. I used to use the nets to get me to just really focus in on my first sort of 20, 30 balls. How was I getting in? Because I knew once I got in, I'd sort of, that's your most vulnerable bit, isn't it? And, and I was quite successful at getting in for a long time. I didn't get a naught in Test cricket. And it was because I put the emphasis on evaluating what's coming in front of me. I'd make decisions whilst I was sitting there watching, but out there as well, it was processing so T20 cricket now, you don't get that time. You're expected to go out there, and they want to go out there and hit a boundary first ball. So it's undoubtedly having an influence. But these guys have played enough Test cricket now to understand what should be happening in Test cricket. You can't use that T20 excuse, because these guys aren't just playing T20. They're playing a number of Test matches. Crawley's played 60 Test matches. He hasn't played that much one-day cricket for England, T20. Even someone like Brooks has played a number of Test matches now. So it's not an excuse. It's an influence, but it's not an excuse.
Nick, you agree with that?
Yeah. I might just off the back of that, I think one thing that was quite interesting towards the end of my career, the word technique really went out of fashion in a way that it's certainly not in vogue at the moment. It seemed to be if you were technical or discussed technique, you were intense. There was this whole feeling around being intense and technique was not something that we should be focusing on. And I found that quite interesting. I mean, it certainly came in towards the end of my sort of my career or the latter stages. And I think that's sort of carried on now through to the T20 game, to the shorter version, the white ball game now, where players are talking about intent, and of course, strike rates are looked at. And those are the stats that everyone seems to be quite interested in. But, trying not to be old fashioned. I mean, their technique is required. It's important. When you're facing Pat Cummins and the ball's moving both ways and there's a little bit of extra bounce or variable bounce, the only thing that's going to get through is technique, and that work needs to be done. So you talk about preparation. That's what I really mean about preparation is if that work's not done and suddenly your back's against the wall and Pat Cummins is putting the ball both ways, if you don't have that work done, inside you're feeling vulnerable and you're feeling like, I don't know what to go back to here because I don't have a defense here that's tried and tested. I'm going to need to run down and try and hit Cummins off his length because that's the way I know and that's the way I've practiced. And unfortunately, when everyone's trying to do that, there's definitely not going to be a consistency to that. There's a reason why Joe Root doesn't do that. He goes back to his defense. And I think I come back to probably it was actually the first, I turned the TV on in that first test match and I was a bit late to wake up. Of course, they start early in the morning and Brooke walked out after the break and Boland was taking the ball after the drinks break. And he bowled the first ball, and I think it was pitching off stump, maybe full stump. And Brooke played a sort of half-hearted forward defense, got beaten outside. It was a good delivery, probably could have left it, but a good delivery. The next ball, he ran down and hit the most unbelievable shot over extra cover for 6. And you just could see that everyone in the change room, the Stokes and McCullum, were going, wow, what an incredible shot. And people on TV probably said the same. And I thought, what an awful bit of cricket. If that is going to summarize England's play, then I'm going to turn the TV off because that for me is not good cricket. Yes, it's ability. Yes, it's talent. But you could see what was going through his mind. He's just coming after a break. Boland's bound a standard delivery for an 80-mile-an-hour bowler that sort of was pitched on 4 stumps, slightly left him, probably should have left it. And you could see he was going, I've got to take it to him. And that's an ingrained psyche that I think has developed from T20 cricket and perhaps and you don't mind maybe him doing that, but I think when you're watching all the other players do it, and I think T20 cricket has a massive impact. I think, even Jonesy does a lot more coaching than I do now, but I don't even know how to coach a 12, 13-year-old boy. I get some underarms out and I'm thinking, what am I trying to tell this guy? To get the big forward defense out or just to slog it over extra cover. And I'm like, just go and have fun. And I think that's kind of where the game is now.
That giving yourself some time, building an inning, setting yourself up, is something that most club cricketers, especially those who bat at the top of the order, will understand. And that's probably why a lot of that outrage, if you like, has come from, because, everyone playing club cricket will know, well, that's not how you do it in the longer form of the game, which in club cricket is 50 overs, let's say. So, Compo, you wrote an erudite and critical article that was across social media around the abandonment, if you like, of the ability to bat time. Where did that come from? Did that thought process form in your mind from watching what you've just described in terms of Harry Brook playing, an aggressive shot when potentially that's not the right shot to play in Test cricket, or were there other factors that built up in your mind?
I think there's been a few factors. It definitely didn't come in the last couple of weeks. It's something that I probably thought about towards even the latter stages of my career, watching the game evolve. And I probably sound long in the tooth and older than Jonesy if I say this, but I probably fell out of love a little bit with the game. Not because I don't love cricket, and it's, I always love cricket. It's part of my DNA, and I'll, there's a test match on, I'm always watching it and what have you. But, the game has changed, and I say that in a good way. I think a lot of players have had to adapt and are earning lots of money from it and are traveling the world. And, I think Jonesy and I are probably sitting here saying we probably would have liked to have, joined that T20 bandwagon for a few years too. Do you know what I mean? There's no doubt about that. But in terms of the actual cricket that I'm watching, I can't say I love it. I think the skills that I grew up admiring, the Mike Atherton against Alan Donald, the Ricky Pontings, against Steve Harmison. I think for me, that's what Test cricket meant to me. Now, it doesn't have to be that's what Test cricket means for everyone else. That's what it meant to me, to walk out there and to front up against the fastest bowlers in the world, to show courage, to show fight, to show determination. I think are the characteristics that, I wanted to emulate and try and play like. And obviously I don't see as much of that now, So therefore, watching the game, and I think what's been frustrating is that Test cricket, a lot of talk about 4-day Test cricket, day-night Test cricket. I mean, Test cricket's still 5 days long. And, yes, it's nice to play a more attractive brand of cricket. And yes, perhaps modern times demand that in a way. We've got to try and get more bums on seats. We've got to try and excite people in different ways. But fundamentally, it's a job, and we want to see teams win. And I certainly want to see the England team win. And I want to see the England team win not only in England. I want to see them beat India. I want to see them win in Pakistan. And those are the attributes, and when we start talking about elite performance, those are the kind of players and teams that command that sort of respect. So yes, I'll probably say it with a little bit of frustration, because I think it maybe downplays the guys who did do those jobs. I was more of an observer in the team I played in. Watching Alistair Cook, for example, at the other end, who did that so well for a number of years, and Jonathan Trott and guys who applied their trade, and it definitely did a great job to set up, England's sort of powerhouse middle order. So I see the game as a little bit more nuanced than perhaps we're giving respect to at the moment. And I have a lot of respect for Ben Stokes. I've obviously played with him quite a lot, played against him. He's a fantastic leader, captain, but I think he's selling himself short a little bit. And I'd like to just see if they could find that balance. They've got the players there that can play naturally aggressive. They've got enough in there. If you add it with a bit of nous and a bit of, should we say, experience, I think it could be a very exciting England team going forward.
I mean, you pulled out some quite incredible numbers in this research that you did. And Jonesy, you love a stat, don't you? So I'm going to roll them out for you just for you to listen to.
I love a good stat. Yours don't necessarily fall into that.
Yeah, but these are compost, so we're okay, right? England faced 143 balls fewer than Australia. Now, I did a bit of research, and the average across the history of Test cricket, the average run per ball is 0.6, right? So that means there's basically around 84, well, somewhere it's sort of around 80 odd runs, less scored per innings in Australia every single time England go out, which is a consequence of their lack of batting time. The other thing you pulled out, Nick, the balls faced per innings. Rahul Dravid is 123. Steve Smith's over 100, 104. Michael Atherton's the only England batter in the 21st century to have over 100 balls faced per innings. Joe Root's 89, Harry Brooks 63, Pope 54, Crawley 47. Those numbers alone just show is the tale of the Ashes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Look, stats can be misleading, and it depends how you want to use them, of course. I mean,
especially the way I read.
It's quite interesting. I also, yeah, exactly. I think it's a metric that is interesting, because a lot of the great players, the greatest players, are very high up on that list. So that says something. It doesn't mean every single player needs to be, facing 120 balls in innings to be effective. It doesn't, because of course strike rates do come into it. But if you look at the likes of even some of the guys who played, say a more sort of exciting, expansive game, they were still up sort of near the 80. I mean, Trescothick, for example, was 80 balls per innings. And Trez wasn't perhaps at the rate that sort of Harry Book is, but Trez was an aggressive player. He was a stroke player, and he liked to hit boundaries, but he was still facing 80 balls an innings. So I'm not telling these guys to be in the Dravid category or the Pujara category or the Callis category. But I think, if you're going to be competitive, and if you want to be a long-standing Test cricketer, I guess those are some of the numbers that one should be aiming for. So I think it's an indication of, just how far off the button England are. Australia, are, quite a long way ahead of them in terms of balls faced. And, I say that because maybe not wanting to be quite one-dimensional myself, but it was very much a mantra for my own development. I spent my whole junior career, and I won't wax on about my own career, but being lauded as talented and trying to emulate your heroes, the likes of Brian Lara, Jacques Callis was definitely a hero, is what you do as a youngster. And you want to hit the cover drive down on one knee. You want to hit that sort of pull shot that Lara did and that's what you practice in the back garden, and that gives you that exhilarating feeling. Reality changes, I suppose, when you become a professional and you're now being paid to go out and deliver an outcome, and you've got to do that day in, day out. And for me, when I set my stall out to bat balls, I sort of did it under the mantra that you're talented enough. Everyone in county cricket, England cricket, has the raw materials, otherwise you wouldn't be there. So there was almost a trust that if I could face 100 deliveries, in the toughest time to bat, arguably as an opening batter or top three, if I could get 100 deliveries under my belt with the fact that I had enough talent, I should have 40 or 50 runs by that point. So the focus changed from trying to get after bowlers. And I think, those who are listening here will understand that opening the batting in England is a difficult place to open the batting. You ask any players around the world, they'll say it's one of the hardest places to open the batting. So the odds are pretty much stacked against you. So if you're going out there to try and take it to them, I say good luck. But if you go out there and can withstand 40, 50, 60, 70 deliveries, A, you're giving yourself a better chance, and B, by default, you're going to have a few runs. And I'm not saying that has to be everyone's way, but I think it definitely set my stall, particularly at the best stages of my career, to bat for long periods and to give myself the best opportunity. And I saw opening the batting as a two-stage job. And the first stage was to give my team the best opportunity to get a large score. And I think when I came into that England team, we had Graham Gooch as our coach, and we had Andy Flower. And we had a data analyst in our side at the moment. All the teams now have data guys and all the rest of it. And the big focal point, and all I remember when I arrived in India, was getting 400 in that first innings. That was the focus from a batting unit's point of view, because apparently if you get 400 in the first innings of a test match, you have something like an 85% chance of going on to win the test match, which is a pretty good, percentage opportunity. So I then worked backwards and thought, okay, I've just arrived in this team. How can I best help us get 400? And I knew that if I could not allow the Indian bowlers or the New Zealand bowlers, whoever it was, to get me out early on, then surely the percentage chance of us getting 400 and batting that day would go up. And it wasn't sort of rocket science, but that was kind of what I could give to the team. So I broke my batting down, and if I could bat till lunchtime, I ticked the box. If I got out after lunch, it was more of a personal disappointment because I didn't go on and cash in having got in. But if I got out, I still ticked one box. Like I've done the hard work, and Joe Root or KP, it's a pleasure, mate. You go out and enjoy now. Do you know what I mean? So I've sort of done my job for the team. And that's kind of how I broke the games down. And I don't really see that thinking with this current England team. I don't see a strategy in terms of how we're actually going to win this game. You can't win it on day one. You can't win it at lunchtime. You can't win it on, day two either. You've got to break the sessions down and the games down and have some strategy and thought behind it. And then you've got to even go further. How is each individual in the way that they play going to help build a commanding total? And yeah, I mean, call me old fashioned, but that's kind of how I systematically thought about it, and particularly helped my batting in England.
Jonesy, that's pretty much what we touched on in previous pods.
Yeah. It is, yeah. So you talk about, Compo mentioned that 400 mark. That was something that my England side was drilled into us through Duncan Fletcher. That 400 gave you the control. And I was a batter who benefited from Compo's style of thinking there. The top order guys would set it up and they would get through the hard period, and then my style of batting would hopefully benefit from the work they'd done. And so that side of it was what you wanted your opening batters to do. Whereas this current side, I think that, they aren't benefiting from work done previously because they're all trying to go out and play one way. And to go on from what Compo was saying there with balls face, I remember early on in my Kent career, we had Daryl Cullinan as our overseas. And I went on I think I drove him to a match and just was talking to him generally. And he was a guy that had worked out how many balls he needed to face in Test cricket and first-class cricket to get 100. So he had he'd worked that out. And Test cricket was a lot more. So I think from memory, Test cricket was about 160, 180. If he could bat that, he knew that he would get 100. But then in first class cricket, he brought that down a lot less. It was more like 120, just because of the nature of the skill level of the bowlers. And so that was his thinking. But then I remember Joe Denley was in the England side for a little while, and his job was to bat 100 balls. But for Joe, having watched Joe play, I didn't like that for him, because he put so much mental energy into trying to get to 100 and was only getting sort of 30 or 40 out of that, and then getting out, because I felt he didn't actually play his natural way. So that's the balance. Is, yes, as an opener, very, very well put by Compo. Your job is that first. We want to see openers get through the first session and batting balls and setting us up for it. But it also is an element of fitting into your game. And I felt Joe Denley was someone who didn't express himself as well as he should have, was purely on batting the 100 balls. And if he'd played the way I'd seen Joe play growing up and through county cricket, and if he'd taken that into Test cricket and been 70 or 80 off those 100, I think he would have had a longer career. But it's a balance with that. And it comes back to that cycle, what we're saying about this current side. We just don't feel they've got that balance right. And hopefully, with the thinking and the talking they've done, they'll move a step towards that in this next test.
I'm going to ruin this outbreak of common sense and deep cricketing knowledge with a true or false. You ready? Jonesy, this obviously is about
ready to go.
Compton family.
Is this for me?
It's for it's for yours, for you, mate. Yeah, you're sick. By the way, can we do this every time?
Okay.
Yeah. He's 6-0 up at the moment. So what's going to be funny is that if I say something and give you the answer, and Combo says, "Actually, no, that's not true." So there's a high chance of that happening. Obviously. Right, you ready? I've got to find it now. Oh yeah. Both Nick Compton and Dennis Compton opened the batting for England at least once. True or false?
See, this is where well, Compo, I'd say, yeah, did Compo? See, Compo could help me out here. He could sort of, if I was looking at the triple screen, it could be like this or like this, but he's not.
He's looking up in the air.
This is where my skewed thinking. What was my last answer? Was it no? Because your last, I also thinking, what's his sequence of questioning here? And the last one was false. So okay, I'm going to go true.
Yes, I've got one back. Unless, of course, Nick says I'm wrong. Okay. Because I don't think Dennis Compton ever opened the batting for England. He was always middle order. County cricket maybe, but never Test cricket. Nick, just say you're right, Sanjay.
I would say no. He didn't open the batting. No, of course not. But whether or not there was a sort of anomaly where he was sort of someone, back in those days, someone forgot their pads or, was sort of still sleeping or something. Maybe shifted up the order.
No. He was very much number 4, batted at 4.
Sorry, Compo.
Yes, I'm on the board, actually. Got another one for you that is about you two. What do you two, apart from having played for England, both of you, what do you both have in common?
Sponsorship?
No, I wasn't thinking that. That
same
might be
sponsor,
true, but you're both Great Nichols or something. Yeah.
Dashing good looks.
Yeah, that's true of 50% of this.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. I wasn't a wicket keeper at any point, so it can't be that.
Oh, Compo, did you take a first class wicket?
I did. Did you?
No.
He took one in the Hong Kong Sixers, though.
Yeah, so first class, that was Mickey Mouse.
That's true, yeah. No? No? Nick, you look like you're going to give me a guess. No, nothing? Nothing from this side?
No.
Okay, your only Test hundreds are against New Zealand. Both of you. Nick got 2 against the Kiwis and you got 1.
Cheap hundreds, weren't they?
There you go. You see, every 100's a 100, mate. Just going to do it. This doesn't apply to you, so you two need to look sort of interested while I say the next bit. Let's remember to subscribe to @Sanjay Murthy
right.
Cricket on YouTube and Closer Play on podcasts on Apple and Spotify if you want to hear any more fantastic bits of information from Jonesy about his career and me getting to 6-2, 6-3, 6-4 and the battle for the true or false trophies on. Now, with that plug done, as I said, and Nasser Hussain said before that the Ashes defines captains and Stoker's obviously under a bit of pressure. So therefore, England have named their side already. And it's one change. Atkinson, who seemed to bowl line and length, is out to be replaced by Josh Tongue. Everyone else remains the same. You boys surprised by that? Nick, as a guest, you can go first.
No, not surprised at all. I said sort of before the first test, I was surprised he didn't play. I say that because maybe not the first test. I understand that because they had sort of Wood and Archer, so they went with sort of two X Factor type players. But I think as soon as Wood was injured and ruled out, I was surprised that he didn't play because we know that Tongue's a wicket taker. Yes, a little bit erratic, not entirely sure what you're going to get necessarily, but I think you need a player with that sort of height and bounce and the ability to get lower order wickets, as he's proven. So I was surprised that he didn't play. I think those cracks open up in Australia, and I think he would have been a better exponent or exploited those cracks more than perhaps the other two who are a little bit more similar. Two outstanding cricketers, Atkinson and Cars, good triers, definitely ones for the future. But I thought Tongue sort of adds something a little bit different. It's the angle that he bowls. So, yeah, slightly surprised he hasn't played the last test.
Jonesy, Adelaide spins. Nathan Lyon, 63 wickets there. The Bashir conundrum?
Well, they've sort of going against everything they said, didn't they, with Bashir as our number one. And that could come back to, it's Will Jacks. He's come in, he's played well in our test at Brisbane. He's played it in a method that they've liked looking at. And so that's probably where Atkinson's place is. He didn't take any wickets in that first test. And because of going down the Will Jacks route, then looking at it and go, actually, do we need Atkinson for his batting? Or can we bring in someone who is a little bit different in Josh Tongue because to try and get the wickets? And so I can see why it's happened. It's obviously a bit harsh on Atkinson. And also, I said in the last pod that Bashir is probably going to come away from this series, this Ashes tour, as the unluckiest tourist, because going there thinking he's going to play quite a role in it. And now he's sort of been jettisoned out and unlikely to play a test match now, unless they play double spin in Sydney, which historically has been an option. But no, it doesn't surprise me bringing Tongue in and keeping Will Jacks. And so, but interestingly with Adelaide, I went down your route and I put into Copilot, give me some information of Adelaide, and it said it favours the sort of the medium pace bowlers and spin. And so Australia have got that in abundance, haven't they? So we've got to find out our way to match that. And so, with what we're doing, it's going to test Will Jacks out with his spinner. He's going to, we're going to need some wickets from him. We saw him bowl a bit in the pink test, and but nothing that really was particularly worrying if you're a batter. And so, with us needing to win this third test match, I think there's a lot of pressure on those bowlers now. That is for sure.
Australia's yet to name their side. You would think there'd be two changes. Cummins and Lyon will be back in. Jonesy, after your last comment on Pat Cummins, social media turned a bit against you. Why don't we see what you said?
Is it right that Cummins comes back in? He hasn't played for months, so everything that us England fans were looking at our own team at, Australia's just had success. They're 2-0 up. And even Steve Smith said that, it's over to him. He's basically, I've done my job. I've won the two. But is it right that Pat Cummins walks straight back into this team with so little cricket under his belt, no cricket under his belt, when you've got a team that is working together and is working successfully?
Yeah, so quite controversial there, not allowing the captain to come back in. What were you thinking? I mean, we've had people leaving the pod. We've had, all sorts of... Some bloke questioned your abilities back when you paid off the back of it.
He was probably quite right. It's one of those... It was, to be fair, I didn't actually mean to stir it with it. It was just one of those, whether or not... I probably didn't put myself across well enough to say with the thinking process of one, Australia always been, from my time growing up there, is about a winning side. Do you change your winning side? And they're 2-0 up. And I was just more thinking about his time off and his ability to come back in. Listen, don't get me wrong, he's not quite the best bowler in the world, which I know one of the guys writing in sort of brought up. But he's number 2, and he's an unbelievable, and he is their leader. So it wasn't. They're always going to bring him back, and I knew that. It was just I was just offering the other side, and oh my gosh, did it bite me on the backside? And I think you were quite enjoying it for a while. What was coming my way, and
a lot of those comments were me.
Yeah, exactly. But there was one, wasn't there? You love social media where they hide behind. They don't put their name on it. They hide behind the numbers, and that was probably the one. Mr. AB 3,423 was the most harshest critic, and I was wanting to fire back and say something, but the calmness in me was like, no, don't rise to it. But yeah, it was surprising. I did enjoy it. Wasn't meant to be that controversial, but it worked.
Yeah, Dizzy Gillespie on Twitter said that nonsense. I mean, you were.
Oh, he had a go as well, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, all the friends you did have, you've lost in one social media post, which is a good effort. Score predictions? What do you think? Australia all the way? England got a chance?
Well, yeah. Unfortunately, I'd love to say yes, we're going to come back and win it 3-2. But having been out there, been in a situation where you're 2-0 down, everyone's against you. We've seen that just walking through the airports with everything. It's so much pressure, and as much as the time away in Noosa has potentially helped England, I think it's a too big a hurdle to ask. And Australia are bringing in, is it 870 combined Test wickets? On two proven.
You've done your research. That co-pilot's an amazing thing.
Yeah, but so unfortunately, I just think I think it's too big a task, and it's going to take a heck of a lot to change the momentum that's currently going on. And an away Ashes series is too much to ask. So I don't want it to be 5-0, but I can see it going 3.
Compo, glimmer of hope.
Yeah, I asked myself the question: who's going to take a sixer and win a Test match for England? And I wouldn't be putting my money on any of those guys right now. Unfortunately, I don't see. I think they've been forced into a defensive position. I think playing Jacks at 7 or wherever he's going to bat and bowling some sort of part-time off spin is a defensive decision based on the fact that the batsmen haven't really performed. They're not going guns blazing, but it's not a wicket-taking decision. It's not playing your best bowler. Now, whether you think Bashir is going to take 6 for, is another question in itself. But he is your number 1 spinner. And if you're not going to play a number 1 spinner on a track that spins, and you'd be looking to him having a good day and maybe winning you a Test match. That's why he's in the squad, right? And if he's not going to play, I don't see Jacks taking 6 for. I probably would have played Atkinson ahead of Carse, but I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. I think the worry for me is Archer. What sort of frame of mind is he in? I think there are some question marks over that. I think Ricky Ponting, got on his high horse near the end of the second Test match, and it was a fair point. How do you get the best out of Archer? Is it a case of you've got to be careful with some of these characters. You start sort of saying, can you bowl fast? And then you get the back up and then they don't bowl as quick. And then, so there's temperament that comes into it. Hopefully we see the best of Archer. Hopefully he storms in that first innings, takes a quick 3 or 4 for, and perhaps there's an opportunity for England. But I think it's going to be an uphill battle. I think they've got experience and they've got more experience coming in. So it's going to be very difficult.
Greg Chappell said that he felt cheated by what England have dished up so far. And I don't think anything we've said on this podcast is going to add to his mood. So I think you're right. I think it's Australia 3-0, Ashes. Well, they just need a draw, don't they, to retain the Ashes. And let's just hope the McGrath prove right. Jonesy, thank you again, mate. And Nick, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Close of Play. And hope to have you back at some point and in the new year, and we'll see what else we can chat about. Cheers, boys.